This video shows the breakdown of a process paradigm devised in creating a morphologic rigging deformation system. To begin with, a mesh is sculpted in Pixologic Zbrush, as seen here, and this is part of the human skeleton, just the top of the skull. And we then take and go to the Z plugin menu and hit this little thing called the Subtool Master. And the Subtool Master will actually open up the menu over here, and then we will hit the Export button. The Export button, we can specify a file format, we clear out the masking and show the hidden points on the actual object, and then we just hit OK. It'll ask for a name for all the subtools that are part of it, and you'll give it a name, and it will prefix that name to the name of every single one of the subtools that you're exporting. So from there, we're going to go into Houdini here, and we're going to discuss the process of setting up the foundation and bringing in the skeletal mesh. So to bring in the skeletal mesh, which is probably the first and most important part of the process, we just create a geometry node, as seen here, and with that geometry node, we then dive into it. And so inside of this geometry node, we have a bunch of file nodes that are reading in the individual objects for the skull, and we then feed those into some merge nodes, which just merge the geometry together, and at key points put in null nodes to continue down the line, create a nice clean version of everything into a final merge down here called the body merge. I'm actually going to go in here real quick and import these variables so that they're properly named. And we'll get rid of this final assets thing because this is just it's not really required to make it work properly. So it's going to take a couple of seconds to bake, and once it's done baking, we'll be able to see the actual geometry that has been imported. Okay, so now we can see the skeletal mesh that we've sculpted in Zbrush and brought in to Houdini to be able to do the next process, which is setting up the foundation. And the foundation, we're going to go back up to the object level, and then in the object level, we create this foundation here. And this foundation, I'm actually going to turn the skeleton off here soon, but we're going to turn it to wireframe real quick. And by turning it to wireframe, we can actually see through them, and we can see what we're going to be doing with the lines in the foundation here. And it's just taking a little bit to load, but anyway, we create these individual curves, which in this case is these vertebrae here. So we're inside the vertebrae, and it's not the easiest thing to see at the moment because it's still loading. We have this edited curve, and this edited curve contains 33 points, and we've aligned it into the center of the vertebral column here. And we've done this for every bone in the body on the piece, and that's the basic structure of it for setting up the actual curves. Now, to actually get the curves to align with each other properly, we had to create a series of null nodes. And these null nodes, we'll just dive into the cervical lines here real quick, which is just your 7 cervical vertebrae. And okay, we're going to just take a look at one of these lines real quick. So how we get these null nodes to act as if they're like endpoints and originating points of curves is that we bind them to the x, y, and z coordinates of the point that we want it to be bound to. And so in this case, we're binding it to the first point, and the 0 is the x value. Here, the 1 is the y value, and the 2 is the z value. And we just define a path to that point. We tell it the point number, which is 1 in this case, and then we tell it that it is in fact a point. Okay, so that covers the process of creating the foundation. The foundation is then in need of some cleanup in order to create the morphologic process, and in so doing, I'm basically just going to turn these off for the sake of speed purposes. And so now this is the clean version of the foundation, and so how we create that clean version. And this is extremely important for doing the Morphologic setup. The clean version just reads every single one of the curves into another geometry node, and inside of that geometry node we have a bunch of object merge nodes, which are these little nodes here. I'm just going to select one of those real quick, go back to here. The object merge, each one of them has a transform functionality that you have to set to into this object in order to bring your curve from your foundation into the cleaned curve rig, and then you specify the path to that down in the enable merge object 1, and you specify that specific object. So these objects, we create them in clusters according to anatomically correct divisions, and these are fed into merges that are fed into merges that eventually are fed into a master merge. At the very bottom here, just before we go through and we fuse the points. And what we're doing by fusing these points is that we're making sure that it's one solid curve, and that every point in the rig is a single point and not multiple points at a point that defines where we're going to be placing our bones. And so once we've fused that, we write out the geometry of that fused curve rig. Okay, so now we're going to be looking here at the cleaned rig again. So part of the thing is that we now take and we read in that original cleaned rig that we wrote out into a file node, and we attach an edit node to it. And the reason we attach the edit node to this file node is because this allows us to do our morphologic manipulation once we've set everything else up. And then what we end up having to do is create these individual lines for every single point on that new fused curve rig, and I've divided them up into multiple sections here, but they use the same exact functionality that the other null nodes used in the foundation. They just are bound to every single point so that we can use them to align the individual bones. And the individual bones are actually generated from the foundation in the previous file and then just copied and pasted into this file. And so we have this huge node tree here. I'm just going to turn it back on real quick so that we can see everything. And so the big thing with this is now we're going to be looking at a bunch of like bones that are aligned, and this process of aligning the bones and creating the bones. So the creation of these bones, what we did was we took the curve in the foundation and we used this bones from curve tool from the shelf, and it's on the character shelf. And so you click that, and what that will do is it'll create a bone link chain, and it'll bring up a little menu here, and I'm not going to actually bring it up, but it'll bring up a little menu, and it'll give you the ability to name the chain and to change the number of bones. And that's how you make sure that the number of bones equals the number of segments in each curve. And that's very important when you're creating the Morphologic rig, is that everything is defined by how many segments there are on a curve and how many points define those segments. Okay. We're gonna talk a little bit, and I'm just gonna show you one of these here, the femur bone 2. And how we get the ability to make the morphologic changes to the rig is through the bone submenu of the bone, and linking the bone length to an expression, calculating the distance between the 2 points that define it. So what we're seeing here is this distance expression, and the distance expression has an x, y, and z coordinate for the first point and an x, y, and z coordinate for the second point, and we just define that exactly how we have for the null node, but we treat it as if we're doing two null nodes and specifying those 2 points. So this first block here specifies the first point, and this second block here specifies the second point. And so what that'll do, now that we've seen this, is that it links this to the length. And every time we change something with the morphologic properties, which I'll show here in a second, the bones will scale and change, and everything will move. And then the other very important thing with the bone node is that we need to make sure that it's looking at the proceeding alignment node, which is in this case femur R align 2, and that just makes sure that it aligns it at the end here, and so when we change things it will continue to change. Okay, so that covers the basic concept behind how you get these functioning, and now I'm just going to show a little quick demonstration of how the rig actually changes by showing you on a actual skeletal mesh, and it'll show you the top of the skull. Okay, so here we have the deform version of this rig, and we only really have the bones available and mutable for the top of the skull, but it's going to show the morphologic quality of the rig itself. So we have these edits, the edit selected, and I'm going to delete that, but we're going to jump up to the object level. And then in the object level we've actually created, in this case, a geo node, as we have done with previous things. And this geo node actually just brings in the skull file that we're going to be using. And then we take the skull and all the bones that create it, and with those bones we actually go ahead and do alignments on them of their capture regions. And so every single one of these bones, if I turn any single one of them on, you can see down here that there's this little capsule that encapsulates the area around it. That's called capture region. And capture region is used to capture the deformations that will be done to the mesh. So I'm going to turn those off again, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive back into the geonode real quick. So here's that capture that I was talking about, and that's done from here. You do a capture geometry, and it captures the geometry around everything, and then creates this deformation node, which allows you to deform it. Okay, so we're going to jump back up to here, and we're going to go ahead and go back over to the cleaned rig with all of its lines attached to it, and we're going to jump inside, and we have this edit node. Now this edit node, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that we have points selected in this. And then we're just going to go ahead and we're going to grab a couple of points real quick. And we'll grab the scale tool. And what this is going to do and allow us to do is to go ahead and manipulate the actual mesh. So we manipulate the mesh out a little bit here, and maybe just a bit too far in this case. Okay, so anyway, we manipulated that mesh out a little bit, and say we wanted to go ahead and manipulate these top 5 points on either side. We can now do that. So here are these 5 points on either side. We can go ahead and pull this up, and we've created these ridges. And so anyway, the ability to actually go ahead and morphologically change this exists within the model, and then of course if need be you would export this model from here, and you would bring it directly into something like Zbrush again and do some retopologizing on it to make sure that your actual mesh is all set up. And we can continue to keep pulling some points on here just to prove a point that it is actually functioning. So I'm going to pull out this node here. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up a little bit. So we've restructured at this point the nasal bone and how it's functioning, and the geometry rig is updating itself to match those changes, and we can change pretty much any feature on the skull here. We can see all those changes that we've made. The change to the segmentic arch and the change to the back parietal bones, as well as the change to the nasal bone, bringing it up further